Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, I finally got Michael Heppell on the show. I asked Michael first to come on the podcast when we'd done about 10 episodes. And I've asked him again about 3 times in between. But finally, a few weeks ago, he put a great post on LinkedIn all about Newcastle United. I managed to engage him in the subject and said, oh, by the way, are you ever going to accept our podcast request?
Oh.
Guess what? He did.
Yeah, well, Michael Heppell, welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you very much. Can you believe that was why I said I would come on, because of a Newcastle United thing. It's the strangest stuff. I probably had products to promote, courses that I wanted to do, loads of opportunities to talk to you, and never thought about it then. Talk about the tune and I'm in.
That's amazing. It's amazing what low expectations of a football team can do to people. What can I say? But actually, as it happens, you're doing extraordinarily well this year. I mean, top 4, look like you're going to finish in those positions. So well done you.
Thank you. Well done you, as if I've had anything to do with it.
Well, no, just the collective Newcastle United. But
I think we had lots to do with it. Booing the previous manager, booing the previous owner.
but for many of our listeners, they'll have heard about Kevin and Newcastle United in the past, but you are allowed to talk about it. But one thing about you, Michael, is that you have, I mean, you're an author, you're a speaker, you're a coach. I mean, is there no end to your talents?
Yeah, I'm terrible at cooking, and I'm quite untidy, and I'm forgetful.
So you don't follow the Jordan Peterson principle that, you should have you tidy your room that you're in. But your room, as it happens, where you're filming from, where we're recording this from, looks incredibly tidy.
Well, the bit you can see is at the moment, and we live in an old farmhouse. It's nearly 200 years old, and I'm in the dairy.
Right.
The dairy is a hexagonal shaped room.
Oh, okay.
And I have 3,000 books around me on the shelves. But look at this, I'm getting to see my ceiling.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's I've got a hexagonal ceiling as well, which is joyful, because sometimes I'll just sit, I need a bit of inspiration. I'll look up and I'll look at that wonderful wooden ceiling and think, couldn't be in a better place.
And on your jacket there, or your
it's called a hoodie, Graham.
Hoodie.
Young people call them hoodies. Yes.
Yeah, I don't have hoodie. I'm too old for a hoodie.
I've got one. See, I don't really like replica bits or current football kits. I don't mind replica ones. But then I saw a certain assistant manager at Newcastle United standing on the touchline wearing this fantastic hoodie with Newcastle across it and this wonderful pair of eagle wings. I thought, I want one of those. So I do own a hoodie.
But on your hoodie, Michael, you've got Write That Book. Tell us about that.
Well, so basically, the Write That Book is the brand for a program that I've been running called Write That Book Masterclass. But it's the words next to it which I think are most interesting, because it says it's not the book you read that will change your life; it's the book you write. And I really passionately believe that when you write a book, it's the most glorious feeling ever. When the box opens and you take that first copy out and you see your name on the front, there's nothing like it. And I've been teaching people how to do that. And We've had about 3,000 people who have been through various pop-up groups, and about 450 now who are going through masterclasses, and who have either finished masterclasses or are on them at the moment. And around about 200 people who have published their books, and about another 350 that are in the pipeline that are going through. And I feel like the midwife now, helping people to deliver their books. It's great.
Do you hook them up with publishers, or is it more likely they're self-publicizing?
Well, these days 99% of people self-publish.
Yeah,
I've published 8 books now. 6 have been with mainstream publishers. The big people like Pearson and Hodder, and 2 have self-published. And then this next one I'm writing at the moment, I'm also self-publishing. You don't need to go with a major publisher anymore.
Right.
And a great friend of mine who you should definitely have on this podcast, Richard Nugent, has just got a new book coming out next year, and he said, Michael, I don't know why I didn't listen to you. He's just signed with a major publisher. He said it's creating problem after problem after problem. He signs his rights away. He doesn't own the rights anymore. obviously. They've changed the cover, they've changed the content, they've changed everything. So it's looking less and less like my book all the time.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd followed your self-publishing formula.
But that's the point you were making earlier, Michael, that effectively that sense of, I don't know, inner achievement, that you've actually really done something. I don't know, is it firstly for yourself, or is it firstly for the people who would read it?
Well, you're going to tell people it's for the ones that are going to read it, aren't you? I'm writing this for my readers.
Yeah.
I really want to get this message out there. But the personal achievement of writing a book is absolutely extraordinary. It's hard. You know, Graham, it's not one of those things where, you know, you just sit down and just write a book. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
And then, and what I do is I teach people how to do 3 elements. So it's write, publish, and sell your book.
Right.
There's loads of people who will do book writing courses. There's fantastic stuff out there, loads better than me.
Yeah.
There's people who will show you the publishing process, exactly the nuts and bolts of how to publish. There's some people who will show you, not many, but a few that will show you how to sell. Mm-hmm. And what I do is I bring it all together, because there's nothing more frustrating for a new author than doing all the work and then selling 12 copies. You know, I want people in their first run to sell 500 in a oneer, and then sell another 500 in the couple of months that follow. And there's a formula for doing that. There's a method for doing it. And that's what gives people the real buzz.
We've had other people on, notably Adam Whitty from Advantage publishing it over in the States, one of the Carolinas, can't remember. Point is, Adam talks about authority, and he made the point that author is in the word authority. And isn't that a big part of this? It doesn't really matter that you sell 12, as long as you're able to leverage the book for your business, especially if you start off with that in mind. Or is I'm
going to call bullshit. Bullshit.
Is it?
I'll tell you why. Because this idea of you know, once you're a published author, great, and you know, and what you can do this thing, and you can call yourself Amazon bestseller. Right. I mean, everybody's an Amazon bestseller. You know, there's a guy, I don't know if you know, there's a bloke published a book with a picture of his foot. That was all it had, a picture of his foot. He got 60 of his mates to buy it all during 1 hour, and he went to number 1 on a particular category, and then was able to put on the front of the book, Amazon bestseller. Right. People might start off with this idea of, it's nice just to have my name. I've written my book or whatever. Yeah. Very quickly, it starts to become, who can I sell it to? How many can I sell? And everybody goes through the same process. So I think the write, publish, and sell is really important. And I was calling bullshit maybe a little bit too early there. The other thing that people do is they say, I'll write a book. It'll be the best business card. Well, only if it's a good book, because otherwise it's like handing out a crap business card. If you hand out a business card with spell mistakes on, and it's all dog-eared and you've got the wrong phone number on it, that's useless. If you have a business card that's beautiful, that people pick and they hold and they turn it around on the back, there's a really good statement. That's what you want to do.
I can't help but agree with most of your points there, but I also agree that, you know, in a limited marketplace, and you're the author, you've written, if you like, the tome for that, I don't know, carpet cleaners in the northeast of England. You basically have some level of authority because, hell, you've written a book which you can give to your potential clients prior to doing any work, and hopefully they read it. But even if they don't read it, the fact that you've done the book gives you a leg up compared to the guy who hasn't.
Just ish. I mean, again, people sell courses on this. They go, your best thing in business is to write a book. I know someone who's selling a course, £2,000, and they say, because once you've written your book, it makes you the authority. Honestly, unless people know about it, you get around your handful of people straight away. If you're pitching for business, and you kind of go, right, what am I going to do? Put a book in the post to them. And then what they've done is they've got their mate down the road to print the book. So the book looks crap.
Right. And
it isn't a really good book, and it isn't a good read. You might as well not send the book. It's got to be a good product. People don't, and I'm passionate about this, you can tell. I really believe that if you're going to do it right, make it brilliant.
Now, Michael, there's a phrase, make it brilliant. Now, that's how I first kind of felt I got to know you. I bought this book called How to Be Brilliant. Was that your first book?
It was.
So how did that come about?
I mean, this is one of those bizarre. I'll be truthful with you. It's just the three of us talking, isn't it? Nobody else is going to hear this.
No. We've got no listenership on this podcast.
All right, okay. So
you're safe.
Between the three of us, here's what happened. I set the goal that I was going to have a book published, and I got very excited about it because I wanted to write the book. And the first thing I did was I went out and thought, who can I meet? Who can help me? And I'd met somebody called David Bell, who was the director of people for Pearson, the publishers, at a common purpose event. And I said to him, is there any chance it was that awful expression, come and meet you and pick your brain about people stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd recorded the set of CDs called How to Be Brilliant. Remember the old audio CDs?
Oh, yes.
6 CDs, like Nightingale Conan type stuff. And I took them as a gift. Graham talking about authority, maybe it does work. And I gave him the set of CDs and he said, How to Be Brilliant, is that a book? I said, no. He said, well, it should be. Let me introduce you to Rachel Stock, who's our top non-fiction publisher. Mm-hmm. And I met this lady called Rachel Stock in Leeds, and we had lunch together, and I pitched this idea of the book, and I was full. I was in a good place. And we got to the end, and she said, Michael, I love the idea. Let's do it. I was like, brilliant. That's amazing. Fantastic. So what do you need? And she said, well, we need this, and then this happens at this time. This happens at that time. And then in April next year, we'll publish it. And I went, wait a minute, it's April now. And she went, yeah, but it takes a year. I said, oh, no, I can't do that. I have to have the book out before the end of this year. So, well, why is that? I said, because I've set the goal. And I said, I'm going to publish my book this year. And I always achieve my goals. And she said, but there's no way we could do that. I said, come on, Rachel, there's always a way. And she looked at me and she had a little glint in her eye and said, the only way we could do it is if the manuscript was already finished. Because I've got another author who's missed their deadline twice, and I'll bump them and you can have their slot in the process. But I need the manuscript. So, well, when do you need it? She said, I need it by Tuesday next week. I said, yeah, no problem at all. I'll have a look over it this weekend. I'll give it to you on Tuesday. I hadn't written a word at that point. I just completely lied and said I'd written the book. And I remember leaving the hotel. I got in the car and I rang my wife. I said, Christine, cancel everything this weekend. We're writing a book. And it was Easter weekend. And in 4 days, we wrote How to Be Brilliant. Mm. And I drove back down to North Yorkshire to meet Rachel and hand her the manuscript. And I remember her looking at me as if to say, yeah, there's something not quite right here. A few years ago, the 10th anniversary edition came out. And I thought, I'm going to confess to Rachel what I've done. So I gave her a call. I said, 10th anniversary edition is coming out. I want to tell this story when I promote the book. Is that okay? And she said, yeah, of course it is. I said, by the way, did you know that I hadn't written it? She said, of course I knew you hadn't written it, but also I knew you would because you were that type of person. I knew you would do it.
And at that moment that you handed over the script there, or at least your initial script, how much... Because she was publishing it, how much of how many changes did she make to?
Oh my goodness, Graham! So that the original manuscript was, I think, 48,000 words.
Right. Okay.
I bet she changed 46,000 of them. Some of the comments were superb because in those days you literally printed it, bound it, handed it, and then they handed it back with editor's pen, red pen. It's like going back to school and having your teacher, scribble all over stuff. Yeah. And there was one, I think it was chapter 4 or something like that. And I remember saying to Christine on the Sunday night, chapter 4 isn't long enough. Chapter 4, I'm gonna pad it out. And Christine said, you don't need to pad it out. You've said everything in there. I was like, no, I'm going to pad it out. So I wrote an extra 2,000 words for this chapter. When Rachel handed me the manuscript back, at the top of chapter 4, she wrote, there's a problem with the beginning and the end of this chapter. They're too far apart. And then underneath, she wrote, maybe lose 2,000 words.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant.
Well, there's a couple of hours you're never going to get back, the hours you wrote those 2,000 unnecessary words.
Isn't that great? And such a I mean, that's a great testimonial for her and her work, that she could actually spot, and mind you, your wife might call her, but having, she could spot that in that script. So, brilliant skill set.
Do you know, that's the thing about, I mean, we do criticize big publishers these days and say, oh, they're taking most of the money and they're very risk averse and you still have to do all your marketing. But the brilliant thing you do get when you work with a big publisher is a team of people who will do that type of thing. A great editor. I've had 2 amazing editors with Pearson, both of them, who really kept me at the top of my game, who would challenge thinking, who would say, well, that might make sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to a reader. And I'm going, well, they must be stupid if they don't get that. And then you'd read it back and go, actually, it doesn't make sense. Let's redo that. And they would really push you very, very hard on your thinking. And that makes you better. It's like having a good manager.
We'll put a link to the How to Be Brilliant book because it's probably still available for sale and now in its 10th anniversary edition. So going back to the point you made a little while ago that you're saying there's 3 big things that you teach people.
Yeah.
And one of them is to sell it. But if in terms of, shall we say, the drafting of your book, and you got this big cohort of people listening to you, and you say, look, these are the things that you've got to get into your mind. What are they?
I mean, first of all, you need a good idea, a really good idea. And I think people get mixed up between what's a good idea for a reader and what's a good idea for them. And people fall in love with their own ideas very, very quickly. And I think it's worthwhile considering, is this a good idea? Is it going to be something that cuts through? It doesn't need to be original. People, oh, I've got this original idea for a book. Nobody's ever done this before. That's a big red light because most ideas have been done before. And actually, one of the things that readers like is they like a bit of familiarity. People do want to know that, oh, it's a book that's like. So, for instance, one of the people who was a member of Write That Book Masterclass, he wrote a book called Certified, and he describes it as the 4 weddings and a funeral of the book world. You're just kind of great. Okay, I get it. It's about weddings and funerals. It's also got a birth in there as well. And he talks about these 3 certificates of life: birth certificate, marriage certificate, death certificate. Brilliant idea. Really well written, won all sorts of awards. A guy called Roger Wilson Crane. Excellent book. Then other people will say, oh, I've got this idea for a children's book and it's about fairies. And you go, and my heart sinks a little bit. She goes, I've been telling these stories to my grandchildren for the last few years and they love them. Well, of course they do, because grandma's telling the story. She could tell a story about anything and they would love it because grandma's telling it. But then writing a children's book that really cuts through, that people find original, but also follows story arcs, that's very difficult, very, very difficult. And then the other classic one, of course, is with business books. Everything's been said. Yeah. Everything's been said in a business book. Everything's been said in a personal development book. I remember when I wrote How to Be Brilliant, in some of the reviews, people said, oh, there aren't any original ideas in there. Of course there aren't, because there aren't any original ideas. That's why. It's my take on it. That's all it can be. It can only be my take on it. And I wrote a book called Flip It, and Flip It did very well. That was a Sunday Times #1 bestseller. And a mate of mine who's a coach, a guy called Tim Brownson, he got in touch with me afterwards and he said, I've read Flip It. And he went, I said, at least, and he could feel this moment in his voice where there was a little bit of anger. I said, yeah. And he went, you sod. So what do you mean? He says, you've managed to write a whole book about reframing. He said, I send out one newsletter about reframing and I think that's it, I'm done. And you wrote a whole book on it. I said, yeah, because there can be a whole book on the concept of reframing. Flip It is reframing, how to get the best out of everything, turning situations around. And he went, yeah, but you sod. I was like, why are you so bitter? He went, because I should have written that book.
Well, he didn't. That's the problem.
That is an interesting idea, because I didn't know quite at the time. I saw the book called Flip It, and it could have been about buying and selling houses. Yeah, which I suppose is just a reframe of something. But in this particular case, you're reframing things that are going on in people's lives. So there's a much more, presumably more positive way of looking at them.
Well, on the front cover of Flip It, you see there's that cloud with the sun peeking out from behind it. Yeah. When you look at that image, what do you think? See, for me, I think, excellent, there's going to be some sunshine. My mum looks at that and she goes, oh, it's a cloudy day.
Can't get me washing out.
Yeah, it's the same. We are looking at the same thing with different eyes. So all Flip It does is it takes multiple ways of looking at life. So whether it's your health, your relationships, your business, time, whatever it might be, and it teaches you these Flip It techniques. And it is very simple. It's a very, very simple book. I always say it's a simple book written by a simple bloke. But you know what? That's the one that is a Sunday Times #1 bestseller.
Yeah.
Not Brilliant Life, which took me, 2 years to write, and does all this real exploratory stuff into life and all the different facets of life and that type of thing. That's a better book, but it hasn't sold as well as Flip It.
It's funny. I've read both of them, Michael, and I actually preferred by a long way How to Be Brilliant.
Yeah, but that's How to Be. I'm talking about Brilliant Life. That's a different one. Have you read Brilliant Life? Exactly.
Brilliant Life.
Have you heard of Brilliant Life? No.
It does say stop living an ordinary life as and oddly enough, there you are. It's amazing. I'm looking at
it.
I'm looking at your online thing, and you're saying it's so very easy to get swept along by the flow and then wonder what happened. So this brilliant life is by what would you need to do in simple terms to have a brilliant life? Measure
where you are now and improve the bits that you can. Don't worry about the bits you can't. That's the primary message. But you've got to start by measuring it. And that's what Brilliant Life does. Chapter 1, you measure your life where you are at the moment. And then the thing I love about Brilliant Life is I tell people, don't read the whole book. Just read the bits that are relevant for you at that particular time. It's a great Lou read. That's not Lou Reed. It's a Lou read, a read that you have on the toilet. Because you just pick up and you read a chapter while you're having a sitting. And it's just perfect for that.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I had a tooth, a crown refit. It was wobbly, and the doctor said, "Well, I don't normally say this, but don't floss around that tooth." I'm thinking, you don't get the dentist saying that. You don't get a dentist saying that. But in this particular case, you want to preserve it for a little bit longer. But in terms of Brilliant Life versus Flip It versus the first one we talked about, which was
How to Be Brilliant.
Yeah, How to Be Brilliant. They're all slightly different ideas. Maybe as a coach, you're being exposed to these ideas in the way in which you would coach people. So is the coach thing delivering the books, or does the books make you a better coach?
Well, a good coach wouldn't actually give advice. A good coach would just ask really great questions. But I'm a bad coach,
right?
Because I always end up giving advice.
Yeah.
So you're a mentor rather than a coach.
Yeah, I mean, people would probably say that, Kevin. That it's more of a.
It's difficult. You can't be a coach and write books giving advice, can you? It would be natural almost, wouldn't it?
It's a weird thing. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I've coached some amazing people who are so much better than me at what they do in their lives, and it just rubs off. You just pick up things from one person and think, well, I've learned that from them. 4 weeks later, you start coaching somebody else and you go, what I learned from them, I can now teach that person. I don't think I would be doing my job if I just went, I'm going to keep that as my little secret.
Yeah.
When I know somebody else has said that. So I'll often say, look, I'm a bad coach because I shouldn't really give advice, but would you like an idea on how you might be able to deal with this? And then normally what I'm doing then is helping people with a bit of accountability. Did you do it? Did you follow up? Did you make the call? Whatever it might be.
Yeah, I see. That you have coached some quite interesting people, haven't you? I mean, from all kinds of aspects. You don't have to tell us their names, but from the sort of sectors of society.
Yeah, well, I can tell you some of the names because they're very happy for me to do so. So, I mean, the person who is one of my biggest fans, and it's great news for me, is Davina McCall.
Okay,
and Davina, in her autobiography, said, "In 1 hour, Michael Heppell changed my life."
Wow.
Which is quite a nice testimonial to have.
It is.
And it was the most extraordinary situation. Her husband at the time, I met him at a lad's lunch thing. I was coaching Simon Woodruff, the Your Sushi guy.
Yeah.
I was coaching Simon, and he was organizing a lunch, and Matthew Robertson was there. I gave him a copy of How to Be Brilliant. He pretended that he bought that book and gave it to Davina. Typical. Anyway, she read it and loved it, and she mentioned it in an interview. She was like, I've just read this book called How to Be Brilliant. It's amazing. And they did one of those pictures of the book, and a friend of ours went, oh, you're in the Sunday Times today, or whatever it was, one of those magazines. So I wrote to Davina and I said, thanks very much. I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned my book. And I just left my phone number. 3 days later, the phone rang. I went, hi, it's Davina. Can we meet up? And I was like, I felt like, Davina who?
This is
oh, yeah.
This is a wind-up.
Yeah, that was exactly that. So I said, yeah, of course you can. Anyway, fast forward a couple of weeks, I'm doing a coaching session with her. She tried to cancel it 3 times, and I wouldn't let her. A lot of people do that. They think they want to be coached, and then suddenly it's like the realization of what's going to happen. And within 4 weeks, she'd left her management, got a new manager. She'd left Big Brother, made that announcement. She'd redesigned what she wanted to do. She was on a completely different trajectory, and it was a big life changer. And then the great thing with Davina is she then tells everybody, you've got to use this guy. So there's a lot of people who I can't name because they don't want to be named, and that's fine. But some of the really most well-known people you could ever imagine, but also Sarah Cox.
Oh yeah,
she was who now has the Drive Time or the Tea Time show, she calls it, on Radio 2. Ask Sarah. She says she's doing this job because of being coached by me, because she was really low. She didn't have a job. She was doing a little bit of presenting here and there. She did the odd thing on Radio 2, filling in for people. And we just sat down and created a complete plan, a complete strategy of how she was going to get back on the radio. And she set a goal, and her big goal was either to have the breakfast show or to have the Drive Time show on Radio 2. And I remember her going, that's ridiculous. How these people aren't going to leave. They're not going to do that. And I went, Sarah, you have to start there. You've got to start there.
And the time period between that outcome for her.
When we did that, and when she got the big job, that she was doing other stuff with Radio 2. She started off doing the 80s show and things like that. She got the 80s show within about 6 months because she put it out there.
Yeah.
She went, I said, you've got to. I said, when was the last time you sat down with the controller of Radio 2 and explained what you wanted to do for your career? She goes, oh, it doesn't work like that. I went, why? Why doesn't it work like that? I don't know. So great, pick up the phone. Oh, I'll get my manager to. I said, no, you don't get your manager to. You pick up the phone.
Yeah.
They will take your call.
Yeah.
It's like Davina, when I was sat with her first coaching session, and I said, who do you really admire in the world of show business? She went, oh, Simon Fuller, who managed the Spice Girls and various other things, created Brand Beckham and all that stuff. I said, well, let's give him a call. She went, oh, can't do that. I said, why not? Oh, because I can't. I said, just pick up the phone. So anyway, we looked at the number for his company, rang up, got through the reception. She went, oh, hi, it's Davina McCall. I'd like to talk to Simon Fuller. She goes, oh, one moment. Put through to his office. His PA said, oh, he's in LA at the moment, but don't worry, I'll let him know that you've called. Can I take your number? Takes the number, and then literally 15 minutes later, we're still in this coaching session, and her phone rang, and she went, oh my goodness, hello. And it says, oh, it's Simon. I'm really sorry I wasn't in. I'm really sorry I missed your call. What can I do for you? She says, well, I'm sat here with a coach, and he thinks I need to get new management. I'd love to come and talk to you. No problem at all. I'm back in the UK on Friday. Should we meet up early next week? Monday, she's having lunch with him.
And because you were advising and possibly coaching it out of her, that her current management, I mean, you didn't set, you might have done your research on her, but when you got to know Davina in this particular case, what was it about, again, without necessarily going into the details, because we don't, it's her life, but what was it about that relationship that you spotted and potentially coached out of her? I mean, it might have been damaging her in some way.
Yeah, I mean, it's well documented. She, Davina had various drugs problems,
right,
and her management that she had helped her during that time.
Yeah,
they were great. So she felt this real loyalty to them.
Yeah,
but the person wasn't particularly nice.
I see.
For her, I've only met him a couple of times. I personally, he wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
And I thought it didn't fit with brand Davina. She's such a warm person.
Yeah.
If we've got time, I'll tell you a very quick story about the type of person that Davina McCall is. We were in a having a dinner in the Wolsey in London, just off Piccadilly, and we came out, and there's a guy sat there, and he's got his hand out looking for some money. So Davina went up to him, gave him a note, don't know what the note was, and then said, "Where are you staying tonight?" I'm thinking about saying, well, if you thought about such and such, there's a great hostel and it's there, and what they do, and if you go in there and if you ask for this person, then I think they're really good. And where are you from? She starts having this conversation, not just put the money in the hand and walk off. And then suddenly he went, "Oh, it's you, isn't it? It's Davina, isn't it? It's Davina." She goes, yeah, it is. And he went, "Oh, can I get an autograph?" So she went, "Yeah, of course you can." Between four of us who were there, not one of us had a pen or a bit of paper. And by now he stood up. And you know what I mean by this? This guy was minging. He was properly on the street. And she looked at him and she said, "I tell you what, I can't do an autograph, but how about a hug?" And she held this bloke, and I've never seen a hug like it, because she held him and he was tense, and she just squeezed him and pulled him in and just breathed with him. And then suddenly he just felt this moment when he went, "Oh," and it just all the tension just left. And she let go really, really gently. And she said, "How was that?" And he had tears in his eyes, and he said, "Better than an autograph." And then off we went. And this guy was stinking, minging properly. And she was beautifully dressed from having this thing. And off we went. And it wasn't a kind of, "Oh, that's how you should do it," or whatever. She didn't say anything. And that is the person. A lot of people criticize Davina. "Oh, she's a bit shouty. Oh, she loves the publicity," all that type of stuff. She's remarkable, a remarkable human.
That's a lovely story. And okay. Yeah, well, in this family, we've always had a very good view of Davina McCall. She was entertaining, beautiful woman, but also I think her heart was always in the right place with people. You could tell that. But you've obviously come across all these very, very wealthy, not wealthy, but very, very well. They've done well in
successful.
Life.
Yeah,
successful. That's the word I was looking for. Well done. Well done, that man who writes books. But basically, you get into their minds and make somebody who's already successful that much more successful. And the chances are it's because, well, success has stuttered, or maybe it's not the right type of success.
That's a weird thing, going through. Might as well go through the rest of these books here. Where's the edge?
You've only got 3,000. We don't have that long.
I'm only looking for mine. Oh, here we go. The edge. So this one here, the edge. How the best get better.
Yeah,
that was a study of success.
Oh, okay.
So what I did was I spent about 3 years researching this book, and I interviewed and studied 200 highly successful people. And I discovered something very interesting, that highly successful people tend to have the same characteristics. They might have different skills, but the characteristics are really core. And I remember one day I met a guy called General Sir Mike Jackson, who was the former head of the British Army. Remarkable guy. The next day I met somebody called Danny Mayer, who is probably one of the world's greatest restaurateurs. And they were both in London, both of these meetings. I came home and I got my notes out and I put them down. And I didn't look at the name at the top. And we had a list of questions that we would ask. And I started to compare the answers. And I bet 80% of them were identical. And at the end of it, I thought, you know what? Danny Mayer could run the British Army, and General Sir Mike Jackson could run restaurants, because it's the characteristics. That's what's important.
I'm pretty sure I went to a seminar with him, and I might be wrong, but I'm sure he came out with this phrase: "Train hard, fight easy." And I wrote that down, and I just thought it was a wonderful. At the time of my career, it was a wonderful way of actually thinking about life. And because it says nothing comes for free, but it also says but you'll be great when you need to be, because you're trained. But and I had a huge amount of respect for him. But I mean, the edge, presumably, it details those 80% things, does it?
Yeah, that's what we talk about. We just go through all those characteristics, and for me that's a shortcut.
Yeah.
I want a how-to book should tell me how to do something.
Yeah.
I don't want to be sat there reading an essay and kind of deeply trying to work out what's the thinking behind it. A how-to book for me goes, do this and that happens.
Yeah.
If you think like this, that happens. If you do this characteristic, if you use this tool, that happens. And for me, that's a great how-to book. You don't have to do it all, but it should be simple. And that was what The Edge was about. And it was really fascinating. Recently, I worked with a brilliant guy. Well, not recently. I've worked with him for the last 6-7 years now, called Andy Alderson. And Andy has a business called Vanarama. And Vanarama do vehicle leasing. And I remember when I first started to coach Andy, he called me and he said, Michael, I've got a decision to make. And I need your help with it. I was like, oh, what is it? He goes, we've been given an opportunity to sponsor the lower leagues. So they'll become known as the Vanarama League. And I was like, all right, okay. How much is it? And he told me the price. And I was like, that is a lot of money. He went, oh, yeah. He says it's more than twice the value of the business now that we would invest over the next 3 years just on one sponsorship deal.
Wow.
What should I do? I was like, you can't ask me a question. I don't understand the marketing plan, but let's chat about it. So I just asked him 4 or 5 questions. And the big question that he suddenly got into his mind was, because I said, look, what are the other opportunities? Well, it worked out. It was the same price as doing a shirt sponsorship for someone like Leeds, I think it was, some dodgy company, some dodgy team. Anyway, but the problem with that is that you alienate everybody else.
Yeah.
So if you're a shirt sponsor, for Newcastle, some people from Sunderland aren't going to lease a van from you.
No, of course.
And he said, but everybody seems to have their big team and they all have a bit of an affinity for another team. Yeah. So like here you've got Newcastle, but you've also got Blythe Spartans and or Gateshead or something like that, who you would always support if they were doing well in the FA Cup or something like that. Anyway, I said, are you persuading yourself to do this? And he said, I think so. Anyway, the next morning he sent me a text and he said, I'm doing it. And that was it. And their business went from there to there, to up. And then just this last year, he sold the company. And if you think about it, like 5-6 years ago, it was on one decision that was twice the value of the entire business to do that. Terrifying moment. And he rang a coach to help him to make that decision. And then this year he sold the business for £200 million.
Wow. Yeah, a great decision, and I suppose you must feel really proud, Michael, that you helped him make it.
Definitely, and the great thing is that he constantly reminds people and tells them that story, and he'll talk about. And I rang Michael Heppell, and I taught, and that's the good thing about having a great coach. And he'll always say, when you have a great coach, you can do that. They'll help you to come to the right decision, and so it's wonderful. And but I don't mind who I coach. One day it might be a Premiership footballer who's lost their way, and then the next day it might be a business person or somebody who's about to retire.
There might be some people beyond the pale. I mean, the one person, sadly, who seems to have lost just about everything is a young man called Dele Alli, who was a brilliant footballer who just seems to have lost his way completely. If somebody like that turned up on your doorstep, you would be able to help him, wouldn't you?
It depends it's a big depends, Graham. If you'd asked me this question 5 years ago, I would, anybody at all, no problem at all.
Sure.
And I've had a very, very high success rate. But I'll give you an example. We were approached once by an agent, and they said, we've got this footballer. At the moment, he is playing in the reserves for West Ham. But we think he's got mega potential. It's just his mindset is wrong. His talent's there. And I sat down with this guy, and he's a lovely bloke. And I said, "What do you want? What's the big goal?" And he said, "Well, like anybody, I want to play for England." I said, "Right, that's what we're going to start with. You're going to play for England." And 6 months later, he put an England shirt on, and he played for England. He played just 3 or 4 times for England, but he achieved that goal. Now, here's the interesting thing: he didn't pay his bill. He didn't pay my bill. I had to take him to court. And then as soon as the court thing happened, you could just see his career just started to just falter again because he's a flaky character.
Right.
And the flakiness came out from not paying the bill. Oh, I thought it was for free. I mean, I had a contract with him. I thought it was for free. I thought you wanted to help me for publicity. I was like, listen, at the minute you've been playing for West Ham reserves, nobody knows who you are.
Yeah.
You know, I'm coaching these people who are some of the best known personalities in the country. I don't need the publicity.
Sure.
And it was really interesting. And I look at his career now, and he just basically dropped off the radar. Because if you're a flaky person, that's what you need to work on. It's not about playing for England. It's about getting the core stuff right first.
So, I mean, without knowing the details of this other character I mentioned, there's possibly work to be done by himself, perhaps before he gets to somebody like you.
Yeah, maybe. But sometimes, it's a light switch moment. You have a conversation and suddenly someone will go, oh, my goodness, that's it. I've got it. That's it. I'm done now. I don't need any more coaching. I'm done now. You've done it in 15 minutes or whatever. And that's great. And there's a temptation to go, no, let's just keep going. But whenever that happens, I just say, okay, let's stop this session now. If you've had your light bulb moment, there's no point at all doing another 45 minutes if we've booked an hour, if you've had your light bulb moment after 15 minutes. And then let's get back together in a couple of weeks and see if it was the light bulb moment. And if it was, great. A load of coaches, they'll kind of go, well, we've booked an hour. Let's just keep going. I'd rather go and have a cup of tea.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that that I picked up on what you said earlier is with a couple of the people that you've coached was early on, you kind of said, well, almost like, where do you want to get to? Where do you want to be? And whether that's, afternoon show or whatever it is, or something, playing for England. One of the early things that you do is you ask them what they want.
I ask them what drives them.
Okay.
And then I ask them what they want. And we have to make sure that those two things are congruent. Because if not, if your values aren't aligned with what you want, you will sabotage yourself. And that's what happened with this footballer.
Right.
What he wanted. He just, as a lot of people do, they tell you fibs about what their values are. They tell you what you want to hear rather than what your true values are. There's nothing wrong with if you have a value of greed, nothing wrong with that, as long as you're congruent towards it and you use it in a positive way. You're like, how can I do better deals? How can I achieve this? How can I do that? I want to be greedy with the money that I give to charity. I want to be, whatever. That's fine. A lot of times people have ego as a value. They don't realize it, but they do. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Accept it, control it, use it in the right way.
You have a brilliant website. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, then they would probably go to Michael Heppell, spelt HEPPELL, .com. And on there, you've got a range of ways in which they can interact with you. So, Michael, thinking about you as a coach, I would imagine that the fees would be quite high to get your services because, well, they are. You're one of the best coaches in the UK. So how do you cope with that sort of higher fee, but also wanting to spread your word, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do one-to-one coaching, people do pay a lot for that. But I also have a group called Team 17 where we do group coaching. And this is a lot of like-minded people who come together and they work as a group to all help each other. And I do sessions and I do group coaching sessions, streams, that type of stuff. And that's £17 a month for Team 17. Wow. So if you want to go one-to-one, great. I'm very, very happy to take that phone call. But if you want to join Team 17, have a look on michaelheppell.com.
How does Team 17 work? Is that face-to-face? Is it online?
All online. Although we're doing more and more face-to-face. We've had 2 face-to-face sessions now, group sessions. Yeah. So there's
is this how you managed to rustle up 52,000 down at St James's Park? Then is that how it works?
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. Well, you see, Michael has been talking about all these people that he's not allowed to name. He's named one, or not quite named one, West Ham United player. I just wonder, is it really Eddie Howe that's turned around the Newcastle United team, or is Michael Heppell coaching them all?
Do you know what? Wouldn't that be great? Eddie Howe's brilliant.
He is, isn't he?
I mean, do you know, one of the things that I love about him is he talks about how he loves his players, and you have to show them love. Listen to somebody in Premier League football talking about loving players, loving what they're about, loving what they stand for, finding out about their values, what drives them first. No wonder he's highly successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's been brilliant, Michael. So thank you so much for being on the Next 100 Days podcast.
My absolute pleasure.
Well, Graham, how often did we mention the word brilliant through that podcast?
Quite often. He is a very, very impressive person, and is helping the world in his own way. I have to say, I really enjoyed Michael, and the stories that he told, in particular about Davina McCall, etc. That just gives you an idea of how it. And the other one to do with Vanarama, those sorts of coaching moments, shall we say. It must be fantastic for him, but also fantastic for the coached.
Exactly. But, as Michael said during the show, there's no new ideas. It's the way he puts them together into a package, the way he turns them into his. And I started off, gosh, it must be 10 years ago. I bought a copy of How to Be Brilliant.
Yeah.
Must have been right when it was first published. It had just hit its 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
And now the stuff that Michael has been talking about today on the show just drops out of the pages. And I'd say to anybody who's listened to this and has liked what Michael has said, start there.
Yeah.
Go to some of the other books that he's mentioned during this, but start with How to Be Brilliant. It is a really, really good book, good read.
Well, we'll definitely put a link to that book in the show notes. It just leaves, I know if you're listening to this in July or something like that, it's going to sound a bit weird, but actually we're publishing this on the 23rd of December. So I'd like to wish everybody who listens to us, whether it's now or in the summer or in 3 years' time, a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
And I'll go one further than that and say a very Merry Christmas and a brilliant New Year.
Well, today I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.